In the vaults, where even light refuses to linger, the grey knights walk alone. They are the Emperor's final answer to the unanswerable, his will given steel, his silence given form. No songs are sung for them, no banners bear their sigil. They are shadows forged from faith, brothers born not of pride but of burden. To be a grey knight is to wake each day in the echo of a nightmare, not one they fear, but one they must become. They do not exist for glory, they exist because something unspeakable always waits beyond the veil, whispering to the weak, clawing at the edges of sanity. And when that whisper becomes a scream, when entire worlds tremble under the weight of corruption, it is they who arrive faceless, wordless, relentless. They cleanse with fire, they kill with prayer, and when they leave, only ash remembers. Yet behind the polished ceramite and the gilded oaths lies a truth so haunting, even the Inquisition speaks of it only in riddles. For what is left of a man who must erase himself to save the soul of mankind? Before we descend into the abyss with them, into the sanctums of Titan and the forgotten war zones of the warp, take a moment to anchor yourself. Like the grey knights, you are about to face the unseeable, the unknowable. If this journey into their silent nightmare grips you, strengthen our ranks, subscribe, share, and let your voice join the legion that remembers what others must forget. It begins with silence. Not the peace of a quiet dawn, but the suffocating stillness that lingers after faith has been broken. The Great Crusade had ended not in triumph, but in ashes, and the walls of the imperial palace still carried the echo of 10,000 dying oaths. Terra was a world of smoke and whisper now, its once proud spires blackened beneath the eternal storms that clawed at the heavens. The Astronomicon flickered weakly, like a wounded soul struggling to be seen through the fog of its own despair. Deep beneath the throne, beyond the reach of the Ecclesiarchy's hymns or the Mechanicus Data prayers, lay a chamber that did not exist, a place cut out of memory and record alike. There, within the hollow silence, stood Malcador the Siglite, pale as dust, his form lit by the trembling blue glow of stasis fields and flickering lumen orbs. He looked old, older than the Imperium itself, yet in his eyes burned the same cold intellect that had once shaped empires. Before him lay sealed vaults of gene seed, remnants of legions now damned or scattered, broken tools of a dream that had turned to rot. It was said that Malcador spoke to no one, yet the chamber was not empty. Across the shadowed hall stood silent figures in white gold robes, the Emperor's last artisans and gene lords. Their faces were hidden behind breathing masks inscribed with sigils of secrecy. No records named them. They were the unseen architects, the makers of flesh and faith. And tonight, beneath the crushed weight of Terra's mourning, they were about to build something the galaxy was never meant to know. The hum began first, a low vibration that crawled through the bones, seeping into thought. The gene vats came alive, each one pulsing with faint light, their contents shifting like liquid fire beneath layers of blessed glass. Aromatic smoke filled the air, the scent of burnt incense mixed with ozone and blood. Server arms clicked and retracted, dripping with genetic ichor. Malcador's voice broke the silence at last, a rasped whisper that trembled like a relic's song. The Emperor's dream lies wounded, he said, not as command, but as confession, but he is not done dreaming. We will forge his shadow so that his light may not fade. One of the robed artificers hesitated. You mean to rebuild the legions? He asked through the vox grill, his tone half wonder, half fear. Malcador turned to him slowly. No, he answered. The legions were mortal vessels. These will not be. The chamber darkened as runes lit the floor, ancient, looping inscriptions carved in black stone, pulsing like veins beneath their feet. Each rune represented a soul sacrificed, a promise sealed. What they were doing broke every law the Emperor himself had once sworn never to breach again. The process drew upon not just science, but faith twisted into function, psychic essence condensed into matter, purity sculpted through torment. The vats trembled violently as something within them stirred. Faint silhouettes took shape, tall, armored, motionless, yet alive. They were not Astartes, not mortal, not anything that had ever drawn breath before. Their creation was a heresy whispered between breaths, a secret the throne could never admit. For a moment, Malcador closed his eyes. One could almost see the weight upon him, the crushing burden of a soul that had seen gods fall and yet still dared to build anew. He pressed a trembling hand to one of the containment fields. Inside, a figure's form resolved, power armor the color of unlit steel. The imperial aquila carved across its chest as if gouged by a blade. The being's eyes fluttered open, and for a heartbeat, the chamber filled with light, not golden, but white, pure and cold as the void. A ripple tore through the warp. Across the veil, demons howled. The Astronomicon flickered, as though the Emperor himself stirred upon the throne. Yet Malcador did not move. He only whispered, more to himself than to the others. "They will never know peace," he said. "Only purpose. They are his silence made flesh." The first of the warriors, nameless, wordless, took his breath. The machinery screamed, then went still. In the aftermath, only the heartbeat of the newborn echoed through the silence. A sound both human and not. Outside the sealed chamber, no one would ever know what had been done that night. The imperial palace continued its endless labor, its servitors chanting prayers of repair to the golden throne. But in the shadow beneath, something divine and dreadful had been born, something that would one day walk where angels feared to tread. Malcador watched as the being's eyes closed once more, his reflection fading from the containment glass. "May the Emperor forgive me," he whispered, and somewhere in the depths of the Imperium, the silence answered back. Titan was not a world. It was a secret buried inside the Emperor's dream, hidden so deep within the folds of reality that even the stars forgot its name. When the transports broke through the shroud of psychic fog surrounding it, the air itself seemed to recoil, as though refusing to acknowledge what it carried. The recruits emerged not as warriors, but as remnants. Men stripped of everything they once believed themselves to be. They stepped onto blackened soil that hummed faintly beneath their boots. The ground veined with conduits of cold light, pulsing like veins beneath skin. Titan did not welcome them. It consumed them. The initiation began without ceremony. One by one, they were led through corridors carved from glacial stone, their breath turning to mist in the frigid air. The halls were lined with mirrors, silvered. Surfaces that reflected not flesh, but shadow, as if their souls had already begun to dissolve. Servitors moved along the walls, whispering prayers through vox grills cracked with static. Their voices overlapped in mechanical chorus, a low binary hymn to unmaking. In those echoes, something ancient stirred, a rhythm older than faith, the sound of men being rewritten. The purging began in the sanctum of silence. Here there were no words, no movement, only the hum of psychic machinery and the faint scent of burning ozone. Each recruit was bound to a throne of iron, runes carved into its arms and headrest, each symbol representing a fragment of the self soon to be destroyed. A skittery artificer moved methodically among them, his mechadendrites gliding through the dim light like serpents, injecting slivers of code and neural fire into the base of each skull. Above, a great sigil of the Imperial Aquila blazed, its light distorted, refracted through the tears of those who could still remember their names. Memory was the first to go. It began as flickers, a mother's voice, the scent of a world's rain, the laughter of a comrade before battle. Then came the surge, a pulse of psychic force that shattered the mind like glass. The past was erased in waves of agony, not with mercy, but with precision. They screamed, though the sound was swallowed by the chamber's walls, absorbed into wards designed to silence despair. The air grew heavy with the scent of burnt synapse, a mixture of ozone, incense, and human fear. Emotion followed, love, regret. Anger stripped away layer by layer until only obedience remained. In this emptiness, the tech priests chanted, their binary voices resonating with the pulse of the machinery, harmonizing with the rhythm of neural death. Pain purifies, intoned one, his voice distorted through his vox mask. Silence sanctifies. Another added, memory is sin. Forgetting is faith. The words became a litany, echoing within the skulls of the dying men until the meaning dissolved and only sound remained. Among them was one who did not scream. His body convulsed, his veins glowed with psychic light, but no cry left his lips. The artificers noticed a flicker of deviation among the obedient. His heart rate flatlined, then surged again, stronger, colder. Within his mind, where memory had been erased, something else stirred. Not thought, not emotion, but awareness. The void did not consume him. He consumed it. Around him the others faltered. Their thoughts collided with his, drawn toward his silence like moths to a dying flame. The ritualists hesitated, their instruments spiked, readings collapsing into impossible symbols. The air began to hum, the metallic walls vibrating as if resonating with an invisible storm. The servitors froze, mid-chant, binary tongues locking in place. For the first time, the sigil of the Aquila flickered, as if the emperor himself watched from beyond the veil. Uncertain whether to bless or burn what had just been born, the initiate opened his eyes. They were not human eyes. They burned with the white of absence, twin voids in which even light was afraid to dwell. His breath came steady, measured in perfect rhythm with the pulsing conduits beneath the chamber floor. When he exhaled, the candles around him extinguished one by one, their smoke curling like souls denied release. The other recruits stared in wordless awe, their own pain fading into stillness. In his silence, they found something beyond fear. It was as though his emptiness had become their foundation, his void their salvation. Malcador's emissaries observed from behind the glass, their expressions hidden, their thoughts unspoken. One of them whispered through a vox link, "The prototype endures." Another replied, "Then the Emperor's will takes form." By dawn, the rites were complete. The recruits had no names, no past, no memory of what they had been. Only fragments of purpose remained: obedience, faith, destruction. The one who had endured was taken away first, his armor grafted to his flesh, his mind fused with something greater than thought. When he rose from the throne, the chamber lights dimmed. The air felt colder, heavier, as though reality itself bowed under the weight of his existence. The first of the grey nights had opened his eyes, and as he looked upon the world, the light around him bent inward, swallowed whole by the void that was his soul. The skies above Titan burned with still might, vast coils of lightning tearing through clouds the color of iron. each flash illuminating the serrated peaks that cut across the horizon like the spines of some buried god. The recruits no longer shivered in the cold. The pain that had once defined them was gone, replaced by something colder, heavier, more absolute. They stood in ranks upon the ashen plain before the sanctum of birth, their armor newly forged in silver as moonlight on steel. No banners hung above them, no drums marked their awakening. Only the wind howling through the chasms sang for them now. Malcador, the Sigillite, stood before them, the storm curling around his silhouette like incense smoke. His robes, soaked with the frost of Titan's air, clung to him like shadow. In his hand he held a staff crowned with the imperial aquila, its wings gleaming faintly in the dying light of Sol. Now nothing more than a pale ghost above the warp's veil. His gaze passed over each warrior, not with pride, but with sorrow, for he knew what they were, and what they could never be again. When he spoke, his voice did not echo. The sounds seemed to settle upon the world itself, each word vibrating through the stone, through the steel, through the very marrow of the beings before him. "You have been stripped of all that was mortal," he said. "You have been unmade and remade, not as men, not as angels, but as the Emperor's silence. You will know no history, no glory, no song. You will exist as the shadow that guards the light, unseen, unnamed, eternal." The silvered warriors knelt, their movements synchronized like clockwork. Their armor groaned softly, sacred mechanisms locking into reverence. Steam curled from their armor vents, mixing with the falling ash until the air became thick with the smell of sanctified oil and promethium. In the far distance, the manufactorums roared, colossal machines reawakening to life, each thrum echoing like the heartbeat of a dying god. Malcador continued, his tone almost a whisper now, though it carried through the storm as if the planet itself strained to listen. "The Emperor's will is not a command. It is a covenant. You are bound not by law, but by the truth that you have seen and that no other soul may ever bear. You are his last word, spoken in a galaxy that will forget how to listen." Lightning tore through the heavens, and for a moment, the warrior's armor flared with reflected brilliance, silver flames dancing across the battlefield of eternity. Their visors remained dark, their faces unseen, their souls already locked within the unbreakable sanctum of duty. Around them, the rituals of secrecy began. Data shrines imploded, archives were purged, and every record of their existence vanished into coded oblivion. What had been created on Titan was to be erased, even from the Emperor's own sight. In that act of unremembering, something sacred was born. It was not pride. It was not hope. It was purpose, distilled, absolute, and pure. The kind of purpose that could only exist when all else was gone. The custodies who had once guarded Malcador stood at the periphery of the ritual. They did not move nor speak. For the first time in recorded history, they turned their eyes away, not in disobedience, but in reverence for something even they were forbidden to witness. Malcador raised his hand, and the storm seemed to still, the wind falling to a whisper. "Rise, knights of Titan," he said, his words drawn slow, each one carved into the silence like scripture. "Sworn to the Emperor, shielded by secrecy, tempered in despair. You are the Imperium's last light in the darkness that is yet to come. When others fall, you will stand. When all faith dies, yours will endure." They rose. The ground trembled beneath their weight, the sound of ceramite meeting stone like the tolling of 1,000 distant bells. In that moment, Titan itself seemed to breathe, the planet's crust groaning, its atmosphere shifting as though awakening from a dream. Above them, the dying sun flickered, its light warping through the warp's encroaching veil. As the planet's defenses re-engaged, great monolithic wards began to shimmer around the world's surface, sinking Titan slowly back into the Imperium mist from which it had emerged. One by one, the last lights of the surface went dark, until only the gleam of their silver armor remained, and even that, too, was swallowed by the night. Malcador turned once more to the empty field where they had stood. Only the storm remained, whispering in tongues too old for man. He lowered his head and murmured a final benediction, words not meant to be heard, but felt. May your silence speak forever. And then, with a final pulse of psychic light, Titan vanished, erased from the star charts, consumed by the warp's cloak. Only the faint echo of oaths sworn beneath a dying sun lingered in the immaterial dark. Some say, even now, when the Astronomicon falters and the Imperium trembles, you can still feel it, that quiet hum in the void, the heartbeat of warriors unseen, the silence that breathes before the storm. The air in the Reclusium was alive, not with motion, but with pressure, a constant pulsing density that pressed against the mind like a hand gripping the skull from within. Here, silence was not absence, but sound inverted, a psychic tension so deep that even thought itself felt sacrilegious. The chamber was built from black marble veined with silver, its walls engraved with wards and prayers so ancient that their meanings had eroded into pure function. Between the engraved runes hung the faint shimmer of null fields, each one flickering in rhythm with unseen heartbeats. The scent of burnt incense and promethium coiled together in the air. Heavy enough to taste, this was Titan's Reclusium, a sanctum where the grey knights came not to rest, but to bleed in spirit. They knelt in rows, armor sealed, visors dim, their bodies locked in stillness. Yet beneath that silence, their minds were aflame. The psychic concord had begun. Each knight reached inward, grasping the threads of his own consciousness, then extending them outward, merging thought with thought until individuality vanished. Hundreds of souls became one dissonant chord, vibrating at the edge of comprehension. It was not meditation. It was crucifixion. Through the shared current flowed agony, memories of battlefields soaked in blood, echoes of demonic screams carved into the fabric of their psyches. The concord forced every knight to confront what they had endured, to let their scars harmonize into purity. Pain was their gospel, suffering their scripture. Within that collective storm, faith became weaponized, forged into a psychic bastion against the immaterium. The air quivered as the litanies began. Their voices did not emerge from lips, but through thought, a chorus resonating through the warp itself. By his word we endure, came the first verse, a pulse of conviction that cracked the silence like thunder. By his flame we are made clean, answered another, followed by 100 more until the Reclusium vibrated with unbearable resonance. Each word was a blade of light cutting through the shadows, pressing against their minds. But even light burns, and within their unity, agony rippled like fire across oil. Behind the chanting came the whispers, faint, crawling sounds, like insects moving beneath the skin of the world. The warp listened, as it always did. The grey knights could feel it pressing against the edge of their consciousness, seeking fractures, testing the boundaries of their will. The ritual was both communion and battle, purity drawn taut against temptation. The incense thickened until it burned the lungs. The promethium fumes hung in the air like ghosts, shimmering in the psychic energy that filled the chamber. And then, amid the perfection of the hymn, one voice faltered. It was not audible, but felt a sudden break in the harmony, like a string snapping under too much tension. The concord rippled, faltered, and the pressure within the chamber deepened. For a moment every knight felt it, a wrongness, a note that did not belong. Brother Captain Asterion, who presided over the ritual, opened his eyes behind his helm. His mind searched through the psychic storm for the anomaly, tracing the fracture in the unity. He found it near the back of the line, a single knight whose psychic frequency trembled just out of sync. The knight's name was Callias. Young by their standards, newly anointed, but his faith had always been steady. Until now, Callias knelt motionless, yet within his armor his thoughts writhed. He felt something cold against his consciousness, not the familiar chill of Titan's wards, but a deeper, hungering cold that seemed to breathe. The whispers grew clearer for him, their meaning almost forming into words. He tried to shut them out, to recite the mantras drilled into his soul, but each one came back distorted. By his flame we are clean became by his flame we are consumed. He could taste copper on his tongue, smell burnt iron, feel warmth trickling beneath his collar where blood should not be. Asterion's command echoed through the psychic link. Hold, brother. Anchor yourself in his name. But the warning came too late. The fracture widened. Across the concord, thoughts stuttered, faltered. The litanies turned to static, like 1,000 voices gasping for air. The chamber lights flickered, and the null wards began to hum at a pitch too high for the human ear. The reclusium's temperature dropped sharply, frost blooming across ceramite armor. The grey knights could feel it, something pushing from the other side, something watching within the storm of minds. Callias no longer saw Titan. He saw shapes, endless and shifting wings made of smoke, eyes like holes in reality. A hand reached through the veil of his consciousness and touched him, softly, like the memory of a prayer turned inside out. He felt peace. Then he realized it wasn't his own. The choir collapsed into silence. The pressure broke. The candles guttered, their flames bending inward before extinguishing entirely. Only the faint hum of psychic static lingered, crawling through the walls like an echo that refused to die. Callias lifted his head slowly. His visor was dark. From somewhere deep within the voxlink, a whisper came quiet, melodic, and wrong. It spoke not as one voice, but as many. You called for purity, it said. We have answered. The remaining knights did not breathe. No one moved. In that breathless stillness, even the Emperor's name felt too fragile to speak. And then the wards began to crack. They say Titan sleeps. But within its fortress walls, there is no sleep, only the slow drowning of thought beneath a tide of whispers. The purgatus ordeal begins in silence, as all torments do. I kneel within the crucible, my armor locked and sealed, my body suspended in a sarcophagus of silver and warded steel. Around me, a dozen other warriors hang in their own shells of restraint, brothers, and yet strangers in this moment. The chamber hums with restrained power, runes of warding carved into every surface, their light pulsing with a heartbeat not our own. We are told this test measures purity, but purity, I have learned, is another word for pain refined into faith. The first sensation is the scent not of incense, but of burning thought. The air vibrates with psychic resonance, the static bite of the Imperium clawing at the edges of reality. I can taste it in my mouth, metallic and sharp. like blood scraped from iron. Then comes the voice, not from without, but from within, the voice of memory, unbound. It begins softly, whispering fragments of a name I do not remember giving up. A child's name, my name, once. The grey nights are not permitted such things. We are sons of nothing, born from silence, forged by the will of the Emperor alone. And yet the voice calls it again, and with it, I see flashes, a small hand clutching a charm, a mother's face hidden by light. The visions twist. The crucible does not simply show you the past. It rends it apart, reshapes it through the gaze of demons. My brothers' faces appear before me, their visors melting like wax, eyes burning with warp light. Their mouths open, chanting the Emperor's name, but the sound is wrong, stretched, mocking. The sacred words turn to ash before they reach my ears. I try to answer, to speak the litanies drilled into my soul, but every syllable burns away on my tongue. The air grows thicker, every breath a scream swallowed by the void. Somewhere I hear the clash of unseen blades, psychic echoes of those who failed before me, their minds broken, their souls purified by oblivion. And yet, through the storm, a strange calm settles. It is said the Emperor watches us, that his gaze never leaves. But in this moment, I cannot feel him, only the press of something vast and cruel, circling like a predator testing the bars of its cage. The crucible amplifies every fear, every doubt, feeding them into a storm that rips through the soul. I see 1,000 lives I never lived, 1,000 deaths I will never die, all of them ending in the same silence. For a moment, I am not a knight. I am human again, fragile, afraid, wanting to live. And that, above all, is the sin we must kill. The pressure builds. The runes flare crimson. My restraints tremble as the psychic assault reaches its zenith. Across the chamber, one of my brothers convulses. His scream echoes through the vox, then cuts short. His armor goes still. The light from his runes fades to black. Purged, the magisters will say purified. Another soul reclaimed by the Emperor's mercy. But I feel no mercy here. Only the grinding machinery of faith, devouring all that makes us who we were. Then the crucible shifts. The storm collapses into silence, so sudden it deafens. Before me stands a figure, cloaked in shadow, features obscured. Yet I know the shape. It is me. Not the knight I am now, but the boy I was before the Emperor took me. His eyes are wet with fear. His lips tremble as he speaks the name I had forgotten. Hearing it feels like blasphemy. I try to deny him, to crush the thought with prayer, but the words die again. The boy tilts his head, and his voice changes, layered, distorted, wrong. It grows deeper, darker, until it is no longer a child's tone at all. Do you know what you gave up to become holy? It asks. The mirror forms around us, not of glass, but of living shadow. My reflection smiles, a cruel, knowing thing. I raise my bolter, though I know it is useless here, and the reflection raises his in kind. The chamber's runes flicker, the wards groan. The air smells of ozone and decay. Then the mirror shatters, and through the cracks, something breathes. It is not my breath. The crucible alarms flare. The light dies. I feel it, a presence sliding through my mind, whispering laughter that is not human. The demonic voice does not belong in the waking world. But now it is here, and it knows my name. The world was dying long before we arrived. I could feel it in the air, the weight of despair thick enough to taste. The planet's sky bled in shades of crimson and black, clouds boiling like open wounds across a horizon scorched by promethium fire. We descended through that burning shroud in silence, our dropship engines roaring like the hymns of executioners. This world had once borne the Emperor's light, but now only the shadows of the warp claimed it. And perhaps, I thought as I felt the storm claw against my armor, perhaps it claimed us too. The moment the ramp fell open, the stench struck oil, blood, ozone, and something fouler still, something that reeked of thought and rot. The ground beneath our boots was slick with ichor that hissed against ceramite, eating through sanctified soil as if the world itself was trying to shed its skin. Demons twisted in the smoke, their forms writhing between nightmare and mockery, whispering in languages that burned the ears to hear. We fanned out in formation, chanting the litanies of abjuration, our voices echoing like thunder in a cathedral of screams. Every word was a weapon, every breath a prayer sharpened to kill. I remember the first impact, a demon, horned and eyeless, charging through the mist with claws like molten blades. I met it head-on, my nemesis halberd cleaving through its chest in a blaze of psychic light. The thing screamed, but its voice was mine too, a perfect mirror of my own roar. For a heartbeat, I saw myself through its eyes, a figure of silver fire and decay, a creature of faith drowning in its own holiness. I staggered, shaking off the illusion, but the thought remained, coiled deep like poison. What if purity and corruption were not opposites, but reflections of the same light seen through different glass? Brother Sergeant Kelvo's voice broke through the vox, steady as stone. Hold the line. The ritual must complete. His faith was absolute, his tone unyielding, and yet even he could not hide the tremor that ran through his words as the ground split beneath us, spilling tendrils of black fire. We fought shoulder to shoulder, blades flashing, storm bolters roaring. But it was not the enemy before us that truly endangered us. It was the war behind our visors. Every time I reached into the warp to strike, I felt it bite back, whispering in my mind with the same laughter that had haunted the crucible. The demonic voice had followed me here, and it was growing stronger. I chanted louder, drowning the noise, each word vibrating through my skull until I tasted iron. My vision blurred. The world bent and flickered, the battlefield folding into itself, and for a moment I could not tell where reality ended. I saw Kelvo's faceplate split open, light pouring from within, not blood. I saw our chaplain's Crozius shatter in his hands as he drove it into a creature made of smoke and bone. And above it all, I heard the choir, not the sacred one, but the echo of our failure, singing in a tongue I almost understood. Something inside me broke then, not like bone, but like faith splintering under its own weight. I unleashed my power without restraint, the psychic storm tearing through demon and stone alike. My brothers shielded their eyes as light consumed the world. The warp screamed. The ground cracked. When the radiance faded, the field was silent. Every demon reduced to ash. The air shimmered with heat, and my armor steamed, its purity seals burned to cinders. I fell to my knees, smoke rising from my gauntlets. My voice was gone, my thoughts hollow. But within the quiet, I felt it still, that presence, faint but smiling. The demon had not been destroyed. It had simply changed hosts. The survivors gathered around me. 6 remained of 12. Their armor was blackened, their sigils half melted by the storm I had unleashed. No one spoke. They did not need to. The victory was complete, the corruption purged, and yet the silence was wrong. Kelvo's gaze lingered on me too long, his hand resting near the hilt of his sword. In that unspoken moment, I understood the truth, that to them I was both weapon and threat, savior and blasphemy entwined. When the orders came to return to Titan, we obeyed, as we always do. The ritual of cleansing would follow. Records would mark this world as purified. But as I looked out from the ramp of the Titanhawk, watching the ashen landscape drift into nothing, I knew the war was not over. The corruption was gone from the ground, yes, but not from us. Not from me. Somewhere within, beneath layers of oaths and scars, the voice still whispers. It does not rage. It does not mock. It waits, patient as faith and I. I am no longer sure which of us it's waiting for. The catacombs beneath Titan hummed with the sound of forgetting. It is not silence here, not truly. The air trembles with low, mechanical whispers, the drone of data coffins, erasing, rewriting, consuming. Each pulse of light that flickers across the stone is another life unmade, another name folded into dust. I walk among the aisles of the Librarium Obscura, my armor heavy, my mind strangely lighter with each passing chamber. The scent of sanctified oil and cold metal hangs thick as incense. Rows upon rows of sealed memory coffers gleam faintly, their surfaces etched with the sigil of the Inquisition, proof that what they hold no longer belongs to men. Every grey knight passes through this place before his final consecration. It is our last march as individuals, though no banners fly, no songs are sung. We come to die in the only way left to us, not in flame or battle, but in absence. A detachment of servitors glides alongside, their flesh masked beneath silver plating, their voices murmuring binary hymns as they feed data scrolls into the incineration pits. Even the ashes are collected, sealed in vials, and sent into the vault's abyss. Nothing is allowed to remain. Not lineage, not name, not memory. The vaults are lit by argent fire, reflected endlessly in the mirrored plates that line the walls. I see myself multiplied 1,000 times, a legion of faceless warriors, each identical, each stripped bare of identity until the only reflection that matters is the Emperor's own light. That is what the chaplains teach us. To purge the self is to become pure. But standing here, beneath the endless hum of deletion, I feel something more complex. Not purification, but erasure so complete it begins to feel like loss. Perhaps faith and oblivion are closer than the ecclesiarchy dares to admit. A robed lex mechanic greets me without looking up. His vox grill buzzes as he gestures toward a single column of light. Designation 47-7 Alpha. Prepare for audit. His tone carries no reverence. No malice either. Just procedure. I step forward, and the light descends over me like a curtain of glass. I can feel the machine probing my mind. Cold tendrils of psychic static combing through memories, names, voices, faces. I hear my mother's voice, faint as an echo from another life. Then the laughter of brothers long dead. Each one is marked, categorized, and deleted, replaced by perfect silence. The process is meant to be painless. But pain, I've learned, isn't always of the flesh. When it ends, the lex mechanic raises a hand. Memory realignment complete. Identity string, null. The words hang heavy, more final than any death sentence. He turns away before I can speak, though what would I say? There are no words for those without names. I walk deeper into the vaults, guided by instinct more than order. Every corridor looks the same, every chamber sealed with the same purity runes. But one vault draws me in a smaller chamber, its lumen flickering, its data console half buried beneath dust. The servitors avoid it. Perhaps an error in the grid, perhaps something older. I reach out, and the screen awakens with a static hum. A record fragment flickers into view. The lettering is half-raced, the script burned by time, but a single word remains. My name, it strikes like a blade. The syllables ignite something behind my eyes, a cascade of memory I was told had been erased. I see flashes, a face I once knew, the grip of a comrade's gauntlet, the warmth of sunlight on a training field that may never have existed. I hear laughter again. I feel fear, all of it impossible, all of it alive. I pull my hand away, but the machine follows, tendrils of static clinging to my gauntlet as if hungry for more. For a heartbeat, I think I hear the data itself whisper back. The voice is faint, neither mechanical nor human. You were just that. 2 words, enough to fracture the walls of faith. I step back, heart pounding behind layers of sound. My breath fogs the inside of my helm. The chamber feels suddenly smaller, the light harsher. Across the vault, the servitors continue their chants, oblivious to what just stirred. I can't tell if what I heard was real or a residual echo, a ghost of the man I used to be. But even that thought is heresy. We are not meant to wonder who we were. To remember is to betray the purity of our purpose. Still, that whisper follows me as I leave. The corridors seem darker now, the air colder. For the first time since my rebirth, I feel the faint rhythm of a heartbeat. Not mechanical, not disciplined, but human. It beats beneath the static hymns, defiant, alive. Perhaps the unmaking is never truly complete. Perhaps the Emperor's perfect warriors are built not from purity, but from what survives the burning. And as I ascend from the catacombs, I can almost swear I hear it again, the soft pulse of remembrance, echoing beneath the vaults of Titan, waiting to be found. The chamber stank of incense and metal, not the scent of devotion, but of sterilization, a cloying acrid perfume that smothered all trace of humanity. In the reclusium, purity was not prayed for. It was extracted, burned out, polished to a mirror sheen until nothing reflected back. Rows of armored forms knelt upon the stone floor, the sigils of Titan carved in cold relief around them, their heads bowed before the radiant flame of the purgation altar. The air shimmered with psychic residue, whispers too faint to be words, the ghosts of thoughts scrubbed clean. I had knelt here 1,000 times, or perhaps it was only once, repeated in memory. The rites blurred together, each erasure bleeding into the next. They called it cleansing, a psychic flame drawn from the Emperor's will, channeled through the chaplains, Crozius, and into the mind of every brother who dared to remember. But it felt less like fire and more like drowning, like watching yourself fade behind a sheet of ice. The chaplain's voice filled the chamber, distorted through his voice. Purge the residue, cast off the name. You are the instrument, not the man. His tone never wavered. It had been modulated into ritual perfection. Around me, the others obeyed, whispering the catechisms of forgetting. I am the blade. I am the shield. I am the Emperor's silence. Each phrase stripped another thread from the self, until all that remained was obedience. But obedience has weight. It presses against the skull, builds behind the eyes like static. You do not notice it until you begin to resist. The psychic flame entered my mind again, white, blinding, absolute. And within that light, I saw the shadow of something forbidden. A name. Not a demonic whisper or alien deceit, but something small. Human, my own. It was gone before I could grasp it, consumed by the purgation, yet its echo lingered. The more I tried to forget, the clearer it became, pulsing like a wound beneath scar tissue. After the ritual, we were led to the dormitorium. Silence ruled there too. Rows of resting pods, steel and stone, the air filled with the hum of stasis fields. I lay beneath the nutrient lines, eyes open, staring at the curved ceiling. The others slept without dreams, their minds purged of all but the mission. But something stirred in me, a faint vibration like a heartbeat remembered in another life. Was it corruption to recall? Or faith to question what the Emperor truly demanded? The Lexicani would call such thoughts dangerous, heretical, but the silence of the chamber made them grow louder. I remembered flashes, a training yard before the induction, a face speaking my name, laughter. Laughter in this place of silence. Impossible. I sought guidance. In the Hall of Echoes, the librarians meditated within containment fields, their minds wreathed in silver flame. I approached one, Brother Vale, a figure encased in psychic armor, his eyes milk-white behind the lenses of his helm. Brother, I began, when we forget what remains. His response came not in words, but in a wave of thought, cool and restrained. Purity is subtraction. Memory is noise. The blade that questions its edge grows dull. But a blade without purpose, I started, but the words failed. The air thickened. Vale's presence pressed against my mind like an ocean. Purpose is given, not found, he said at last, and turned away, later. I found myself before the memorial wall, a slab of obsidian etched with runes of the fallen. Names erased and rewritten over centuries. Some had faded completely, leaving only shallow grooves. I traced one with my gauntlet finger and felt the heat of memory beneath it, as though the stone itself remembered what we could not. They tell us we are eternal, but eternity is only the absence of time, and in that absence something begins to rot. I saw it in Brother Cestus weeks ago, before he vanished. During his last purification, his mind had fractured His screams were not of pain, but of recognition. He called out names none of us should know. The chaplains claimed he had glimpsed the warp, but I think he had glimpsed himself. Now, when I kneel in the reclusium and the incense fills my lungs, I no longer feel devotion, only the weight of absence. I wonder how many of us are hollow beneath the silvered armor, how many minds quietly burning behind the mask of obedience. We are told to fear demons, but the real terror lies in the spaces they cannot reach. Perhaps the greatest heresy is not corruption, but remembrance. To know who we were before we became perfection. To feel the faint pulse of a forgotten name beating beneath the purity they carved into us. The next purgation awaits. The flame rises. The chaplain's voice echoes again. Forget. And this time, I hesitate. The world was a ruin of ash and screaming sky. The air itself seemed to burn, a choking mix of promethium fumes and the iron temps of vaporized blood. Beneath that poisoned heaven, the grey nights descended. Silver silhouettes through storms of daemon fire, their armor gleaming like shards of faith against the dark. I remember the way the ground shook beneath us, not from impact, but from the chanting. The entire strike force spoke as one, their voices layered through vox grills, transformed into something beyond human. A psalm of annihilation. We landed upon what had once been a city, now a carcass of twisted manufactorums and shattered cathedra. The demon horde had infested the ruins, crawling through the blackened spires like maggots through a corpse. Their shrieks cut through the wind, high and wrong, echoing through the fractured towers. The air shimmered with their corruption. Every breath felt like swallowing acid, and yet, in that infernal glow, I saw beauty. The kind only found where faith refuses to die. Brother Vale advanced ahead, his nemesis force halberd glowing with psychic flame. Each swing was a prayer, each kill a plea for absolution. I followed close, the weight of my own weapon, a daemon hammer, trembling faintly with psychic resonance. Our minds were linked through the battle cant, words unnecessary. Still, beneath that perfect unity, I felt it again, the echo of myself. That forbidden fragment of a name pulsing behind the layers of conditioning. The enemy came in waves. Flesh that wasn't flesh, eyes that wept fire, mouths whispering in forgotten tongues. When their claws met our armor, reality screamed. The wards carved into my plating flared with blue light, sealing the breach between worlds. I could hear the screams of lesser mortals over the comes the Astra Militarum, holding the outer line. They fought bravely, knowing they would not survive. Perhaps that's why I envied them. They died with memory intact. As we pushed deeper into the city, we found what drew the corruption here. A warp rift tearing through the bones of a cathedral once consecrated to the Emperor. Its spire had collapsed inward, forming a wound in the fabric of reality. At its heart stood the demon prince, vast, horned, its form shifting between nightmare and blasphemy. The creature smiled when it saw us. It knew our names. The chaplain intoned the rites of severance, his crozius raised high, light spilling from its edges like molten sun. By his will, all shadow shall perish, he thundered. But the demon only laughed, a sound that made the world shiver. I felt it probe my thoughts, slithering past the psychic wards, whispering, "You remember, don't you?" For a moment, I faltered. My name, my true name, flashed behind my eyes, bright and terrible. The conditioning screamed against it, trying to burn it out. But I held on, because in that single word, I felt everything the purgations had stolen. Fear, love, doubt, longing the things that make a soul worth saving. I struck then, driving the daemon hammer through its chest. Psychic fire erupting in a storm of silver light. The world tore open around us. Veil was thrown aside, his armor cracked, his mind bleeding into the ether. The demon screamed as the light consumed it, not in agony, but in recognition. I realized, too late, what I had done. The purity of the strike had come not from faith, but from remembrance, and the warp remembers everything. When the light faded, the rift was gone. The demon was no more. Only silence remained, broken by the hiss of cooling armor and the crackle of distant fire. The surviving knights gathered in formation, their helms turning toward me. The chaplain's voice came over the vox, low and weighted. "Brother, you have acted outside the litany. Explain." I looked at him through my cracked visor. I wanted to speak, to tell him what I had seen, what I had remembered, but the words died in my throat. Perhaps some truths cannot exist within the Emperor's light. Perhaps they were never meant to. I looked down at my gauntlet, still glowing faintly from the demon's death, and saw something etched there, not in scripture, but in blood. My name, I whispered it once, softly, tasting it like a forbidden sacrament. Then I wiped it away. The silence that followed was not emptiness, it was peace. As dawn broke over the ruins, the ash settled like falling snow. The vox crackled with distant hymns from the orbiting strike cruiser, and I knew the record would speak only of victory. No mention of hesitation, no mention of names, but somewhere, beneath the sigil of Titan, a ghost would remain, not a demon, not a heretic, but a memory that refused to die. And in that silence, I heard it one last time, a voice, mine, whispering from the edge of oblivion. Then nothing. The air inside the luminous vault did not move. It shimmered, as though even light itself feared to breathe. Titan storms howled beyond its adamantine walls, but within there was only silence. A silence so complete it became a sound of its own, a low thrumming beneath the skin, vibrating in time with the heartbeats of those who stood within it. 40 grey knights knelt in concentric circles, heads bowed, hands pressed to the cold floor engraved with the imperial aquila. The gold sigil beneath them pulsed faintly with psychic light, alive with the rhythm of their collective will. The rite of resonance had begun. I could feel the weight of the ritual pressing inward, a vast pressure that seemed to grind thought into dust. Every breath was a prayer, every movement a sacrifice. We were conduits, living channels of the Emperor's divine agony. And as our voices rose in perfect unity, that agony seeped into us like light through stained glass. It burned cleanly, beautifully, and yet there was something wrong about its perfection. The cantor of flame moved through the circle, his armor gilded and inscribed with litanies older than the Imperium itself. His voice carried through the vox grill, deep and resonant. In his suffering, we are made pure. In his silence, we are heard. The words echoed through the chamber, and the sigil beneath us flared brighter. The psychic field rippled outward, touching the carved walls, each surface inscribed with words and scripture, written in both ink and blood. I closed my eyes. At first, there was only the usual communion, that distant hum of power that came from the Astronomicon, like the voice of a son too far away to see. Then, deeper still, I felt it, that pulse of sorrow that was the Emperor's eternal pain. It poured through the conduits, through the vault, through me. It was unbearable and beautiful, a tide of golden anguish. But then something changed. The light within the vault began to thicken, like liquid gold poured into glass. My armor's sensors spiked, registering psychic interference beyond known thresholds. The air vibrated, distorting the edges of sound, and for the first time, I thought I could hear something beneath the prayers. A whisper. It came from the light itself, not words, not language, but intent. It was not the Emperor's voice. It was something else, something that listened back. I tried to focus, to dismiss it as exhaustion. But the whisper grew louder, weaving itself between the verses of our chant. I could feel it crawling along the edges of my mind, gentle as silk, patient as hunger. It asked for nothing. It simply watched. Across from me, Brother Captain Rail's posture faltered. His hands shook. The light around him burned too bright, searing the metal of his vamp. The cantor's chant faltered just for an instant, but that instant was enough. The balance broke. A surge of raw psychic energy erupted from Rail's position, striking the circle like a storm. I was thrown to my knees as the floor cracked beneath the strain. The golden light turned white, then violet, and the whispers became a roar, laughter and weeping intertwined. A sound that should not exist within sanctified space. Hold the resonance. The cantor bellowed, his voice layered with psychic command. Do not let it breach. But it was already too late. The light was not radiance anymore, it was hunger. A devouring brilliance that consumed the shadows and then reached for more. I felt it inside me, clawing through the walls of thought, tearing open the barriers that the purgations had built. I saw fragments of memory, faces without names, voices without bodies, all the lives that had been burned away to make me pure. And the light fed on them. Rael screamed. His armor split along the seams, molten from within. For an instant, I saw his eyes, two burning points of gold, wide with terror and awe. He is not silent. He gasped through the vox. He hungers. Then his voice was gone, swallowed by the radiance. The cantor reached forward, his staff of sanctity blazing with runes. He pressed it to the floor, forcing the light back, chanting words that were half prayer, half command. One by one, the knights rejoined the litany, rebuilding the circle. The air trembled, the sigil cracked, and with a thunderous snap of psychic recoil, the light vanished. Silence fell again. The vault dimmed to its usual golden glow, calm and cold. Rael's armor lay empty at the center, no body, no ash, only the faint smell of ozone and sanctified oil. The cantor said nothing. He only turned toward the rest of us and nodded once. The resonance holds, he murmured, though his voice was thin. The Emperor's light endures. But as I rose to my feet, the echo of that whisper lingered. It had not vanished with the light. It was still there, behind the hymns, beneath the silence, something vast and patient, waiting in the currents of the ASTRONOMICN. And when I closed my eyes again, I swore I could feel it looking back. The descent began in silence. Not the silence of peace, but the void-born calm that exists before cataclysm. A stillness so absolute, it feels like a breath being held by the universe itself. Through the Thunderhawk's viewing slit, I saw the world below, a sphere once blue and living, now burning from its core. Warplight crawled across its surface like veins of molten glass, pulsing with colors that had no name. The vox crackled faintly with litanies of purification. Somewhere within the hull, the purity seals fluttered as though shivering. The moment the drop bay opened, the world screamed. The roar of atmosphere tore through the transport. The taste of ozone and blood filling my mouth as gravity seized us. Titan-trained hearts did not race, but the body remembered what the soul had long forgotten. The fear of falling into something alive. The landscape below shimmered with impossible geometry, demonic forms moving like reflections on a stormed sea. They were not armies, but diseases, infestations of blasphemy wearing flesh. And we, the Grey Knights, were the cure. Our boots struck ground that hissed like flesh upon an altar. The air was thick with ash, and voices whispers without lungs. My armor's filters strained to keep them out, but they were not sound anymore. They were present. Each syllable felt like a finger tracing the inside of my skull. The order came through the vox. The calm, mechanical tone of Brother Captain Thane formed the crucible, burned the infection. I raised my storm bolter and felt the psychic ignition rise within me, a tide of cold fire that began in the marrow and climbed upward, consuming everything in its path. The ground trembled as we advanced, and the first volley turned the demons into vapor. Holy bolts met unholy matter, and the two annihilated each other in flares of blue-white light. The scent of burning ozone mingled with sanctified incense leaking from our armor vents. In that light, the shadows screamed, but it did not stop. It never stopped. Every invocation, every burst of faith-fueled destruction spread further than intended. The demons fell, but so did the trees, the water, the ruins of cities that might have once held imperial souls. The light did not differentiate. It consumed. I could feel it spreading from my gauntlets. The psychic fire no longer obeying command, only desire. Purity turned ravenous. Devotion became hunger. Brother Captain Thane's voice cut through the vox. Contain it. The flame is ours to wield, not to fear. But his words fractured under the roar of the warp storm above. A new kind of lightning fell, not from the sky, but from within us. Each strike illuminated fragments of a world unmade, statues of saints melting into molten tears, cathedrals burning so bright their spires turned transparent. We moved through the devastation as if through a dream of penance. Every swing of a nemesis blade carved both reality and spirit. Every psychic surge silenced not only demons, but the echoes of human screams buried within the noise. I began to notice the light clinging to my armor, refusing to fade after each kill. It crawled across the metal like molten veins, seeping into the joints, pulsing in time with my heartbeat. And then I heard it again, the whisper, the same one from the vault. It coiled through the static of the vox, through the hymns, through the rhythmic recitation of the Emperor's name. But this time it was not a whisper at all. It was breathing, soft, close, intimate. You burn well, it said, though the words were not heard but known. I turned, instinctively raising my weapon, but there was nothing behind me, only the afterglow of psychic fire reflecting off the glassed earth. Yet every step I took left another trail of gold behind, bleeding from my armor like liquid light. Brother Captain Thane pressed forward into the inferno, leading the charge toward a chasm that pulsed with warp energy. The demonic host was collapsing, their forms unraveling in shrieks that turned to hymns as they died. Victory, salvation, and yet the light kept spreading. Even after the last of the demons was gone, the radiance remained, licking across the horizon until it devoured the color from the sky. I felt my gauntlet tremble. My armor's diagnostics flashed crimson warnings, psychic overload, integrity breach, temperature rising beyond containment. But I could not stop. The fire was no longer something I commanded. It was something I was. Every fiber of my being cried out for release, for consumption. And as I looked down at my reflection upon the polished edge of my nemesis blade, I saw not my face, not even the mask of my helm, but two orbs of gold, burning and hollow, staring back, for the first time in all my service. I hesitated. In that pause, the world around me fell silent again. The fire burned soundless, weightless, beautiful, a cathedral of annihilation built upon the ruins of faith. And deep within its glow, I understood a terrible truth. Perhaps the Emperor's radiance was never meant to purify. Perhaps it was meant to endure, to consume all impurity until nothing remained. Not even the pure. The whisper exhaled once more, soft as dying flame. Now you understand, it murmured, and as the horizon cracked open with light too bright for creation to hold, I raised my blade, uncertain whether I meant to fight or to pray. The silence on Titan was not the silence of peace. It was the silence of something watching itself breathe. Within the luminous vault, that silence pulsed like a living organ, heavy with light. The grey knights stood motionless, their silver armor reflecting gold that no longer seemed holy. It was too bright, too hungry, as though illumination itself had grown teeth. Brother Justicar Thane knelt among them, head bowed, his gauntlets trembling ever so slightly as the psychic hum in his skull deepened into a steady, resonant ache. He could feel it again. That vibration, that impossible warmth crawling beneath his skin, whispering in the language of light. The rite had ended, the battle long since won, yet something inside him had not dimmed. It was still feeding. The vault's air was metallic, saturated with ozone and incense. The scent of sanctified oil clung to the stone, mingling with the faint temps of promethium from the ever-burning torches. Each flame shimmered as if bending toward the knights in supplication, or perhaps in fear. Above the dais, the colossal effigy of the emperor towered, his outstretched hand, sculpted from marble, so radiant it hurt to look upon. Beneath that hand, the grey knights whispered their final litanies, not in triumph, but in uncertainty. Thane's mind drifted to the battlefield they had left behind, that demon-tainted world reduced to glass and silence. He could still hear the cries of the living who had stood too close to their sanctified fire, their voices cut short by light that spared no distinction between corrupted and pure. He had believed, once, that the Emperor's radiance cleansed. But now he felt it differently, not as mercy, but as consumption, like a tide that swallowed all, without question or remorse. Was this, then, the true nature of salvation? To burn so brightly that nothing remains untouched. He looked at his brothers and saw that same golden shimmer in their eyes, faint like embers behind the iris. It flickered in rhythm with the vault's glow, synchronized as if guided by an unseen conductor. When the librarian began the benediction of binding, Thane felt the sound not through his ears but through his bones. The words rippled outward, vibrating through the steel and stone, through the blood and thought of every knight present. And beneath those words, something else stirred, a low, pulsing echo that was not prayer but hunger. They say the Emperor's light guides through the void, carried upon the Astronomicon, a beacon to all loyal souls. Yet, in that moment, Thane wondered, what if it was not guiding them at all? What if it was feeding, drawing the faithful closer? One thought at a time, one soul at a time, until all that was left of mankind was light devouring itself. Such heretical musings should have terrified him, yet they did not. They felt inevitable. The more he resisted the thought, the more it took shape, like a truth too sacred to name. The vault trembled, statues cracked. For an instant, the golden light flared white, so pure it burned the shadows from the room. The sound that followed was not thunder, nor machinery, but something closer to a sigh, vast, cosmic, almost mournful. Several knights collapsed, their armor steaming, their voices gone. Thane remained standing, though barely. The resonance filled him now, pulsing behind his eyes, coursing through his veins. He felt infinite and hollow. He raised his gaze to the statue of Malcador beside the Emperor, and for the first time he saw its expression shift, not in movement, but in meaning. The regent's stone eyes seemed knowing, as if this had all been foreseen, accepted, sanctified. The librarian's voice cracked mid-verse. One by one, the knights fell to their knees, their psychic link intertwining until thought became chorus. The light grew unbearable. It was not illumination now, it was revelation. In that brilliance, Thane saw everything at once. the warp folding upon itself, the Astronomicon as a wound bleeding across the stars. And within that wound, the Emperor, not enthroned but crucified by his own radiance. His agony was the universe's heartbeat, his suffering the engine of faith. Thane dropped his blade. The sound it made was swallowed instantly by the glow. He tried to speak a prayer, but his voice dissolved into the light. Around him, the vaults. Walls faded, the air itself thinning until nothing remained but brilliance. He understood then, the Emperor's light had never been meant to banish the dark. It was the dark, transfigured, a devourer made divine through necessity. The final thought that passed through his fading mind was not of fear, but acceptance. The purest flame, he realized, does not choose what it consumes. It only burns. And then the vault was silent once more, a silence deeper than before. Alive, watching, waiting.